So up to now we have created a component. A component is a reusable piece of code a reusable component that can be utilized throughout our document using the name of the component that we created. And the only thing I've changed since the last video is I've changed the data that I put inside of these open and closing tags because I really wanted to highlight the fact that we are sending data so far from our DOM, from the markup tags that we created using our components. We're sending data from the DOM into our component. Our component has created a template, and so the data that we sent from the DOM into the component into our template is what's being rendered on our page. So the next thing we're going to do in this video is we're going to demonstrate that a component can too have its own set of properties, similar to what we have here where our view instance has its own set of properties. A component can also have its own set of properties. And so we're going to handle that next. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my template, and I'm just making some spacing for myself to make things look a little cleaner here. And I'm going to put in an image. And so I'm going to put in an image tag, image, and for now I'm just going to hard code in an image. Here in my project, you'll see that I have two images, puppy and puppy 2. So I'm going to be working with those. So I'm going to do source equals, and we'll just do something simple to start with where I'm going to hard code in puppy 2. And so let's see what happens when I render that particular piece. All right, so I got an error, and this error comes up when it says component, so my component that I'm creating, template, should contain exactly one root element. So it says that I have to have one root element in my template. Well, I have two elements in my template. I have an H4 and an image tag. Now I can have more than one element. The problem is I can only have one root element, or if you want to call it a parent element. So that's not a problem. I can fix that. I'm just going to put in an open and close div tag. And so now if you look at this, I have one root element that has elements within it. So that should be legal. So let me see what happens now. Now I'm getting those images. So that is not unlike what we've created just for a reference. The fact that we have one root element, which is our view instance. And then within that, we have some components that are creating some other elements. All right. So that works. But I don't want to hard code in the puppy. I'm going to make the image source a data property of the component so that way I can change it through code if I'm interested in it, right? Because anytime you have a property, then you can change the value of it through code, right? So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so I'm going to do a comma. I'm going to write the word data, and I'm going to try to do it exactly the way it was done here in the view instance. So if I do data, and I'm going to put, I would like to do an image source, image src equals, and I'll do the other puppy just so I can see the change. All right, so I have image source, puppy, and JPEG. Okay, so remember that when we are trying to get at an attribute or a class using view, we can't put this variable in a string here, right? We had to do the vbind, and we saw that in an earlier video, so I'm just going to remind you that that was a thing and not walk through that. So I'm going to do vbind and src, which I already have there, and then the property that I'm interested in. So I'm using this data image source property, so I should only have to put in image img src. Okay, so vbind says I need to send data to the image element. View, can you bind, can you get this value, bind this value into the source attribute and send that to the image tag. All right, so let's see if that works. All right, so getting a syntax error after ID. So I do this all the time. Image source, this is a property. property colon value. This is an assignment, so I make this mistake all the time. I recognized as soon as I saw that error. Okay, so remember, property colon and then the value. All right, so now let's refresh and see what happens. All right, I still am getting an error. And the error is saying the data option should be a function that returns a per instant value in component definitions. Okay, if that's not confusing enough, let me see what I can do to try and explain that. All right, so we were able to get away with having data and a single data property for our view instance because we only have one view instance. But the idea behind a component is that we can create lots of them. So headings, we can have 10 headings if we want to. But if we have lots of different headings, then somehow we have to make this data property unique to each individual heading. And so we can't just say that all components have a data property of image source puppy because we have to make this unique. In other words, if I change the image source for one component, I don't want to change it for all components, which is what this would do. So in order to make this unique, and if you don't really understand what I said, just at least remember the syntax. For components, we have to create it. I think I've got too much going on here, so I'm going to remove those brackets. Oh, I think the brackets stay there. I'm making this confusing. All right, so a data has to return, a data has to be a function. Sorry, I get wrapped up in all the syntax as well. A data has to be a function that returns, so I'm just reading this words, the data option should be a function that returns a per instance value. Okay, so what we're going to return is a object of our data properties. img src equals, not equals, colon, and then what are we going to do? Puppy, I don't remember which one I was doing. Puppy, we'll do puppy 2. All right. And so now, by utilizing returning a, let's see, I still have returned, not returns. There we go. Okay, so to reiterate, we have in order to utilize data properties now, we have to have a function that returns an object of our data properties. And so I could put more data properties in here, obviously, just like we've done down below. So if I had something like another property, and then colon, and then some other value, 5 or whatever, you can continue on with your list, no different than we did down here with the view instance. But just remember that the syntax has to be a little bit different in order for each of these data properties to be specific to the unique instance of the component. All right, so let's see what happens. Let's run this now, and now we're getting our puppies. So let me kind of finish up with that point. Let's create a button which we'll do an on click. So remember, you can do V on click, or you can simply do an at click, whichever you prefer, equals, and we're going to create a function that says change image. So change the image. So the idea here is I'm going to try and demonstrate the fact that we can do methods, but why this has to be unique to each individual component. So after the data, I'm going to put a comma, and just like we did before, now everything else remains the same. I can have methods, and so my method would be change image, and in my change image, then I'm going to change the source of this unique component, meaning, let's see, this dot image src equals, we'll change it to the other puppy dot jpeg. All right, so let me pull this down so you can see all of that together. All right, so I'm going to refresh the page and see that if I click on this component image, let's see, let's do this. Okay, so you can see that image source for this component, which is called headings, is puppy 2. besides the fact that you can see it here visually, but this is also a nice way to do it. So here we can see image source is puppy2. So if I click on the bottom button, we see image source changing for the bottom button, but obviously not for the top because it's still keeping puppy2. And that's because we had to, Vue forced us into this syntax where we had to create a function that returned a set of data properties rather than, and I can't even demonstrate it because you saw that we got an error. I can't demonstrate it the other way, but just understand that that's why this is done. By returning an object, that's how Vue keeps separated each of the individual components' data sources. So hopefully this demonstrated why you do it, and the fact that we have now in this video reminded ourselves that vbind was a way to send data into an element, an attribute, right? And so we also created a data function that returned all of our data properties, and then we utilized methods in order to access that data property and give us the ability to change it via our methods. So anytime now we change image source, so if I changed image source here, this just gives a hard-coded demonstration. It's changing there as well. So, all right, on to the next video.